Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take your source collections and really pull out the key insights just for you.
And this time, it's the War of 1812.
Yeah.
We've got a fantastic mix, historical accounts, letters, even a song.
Yeah, military stuff, maps, and even NASA satellite views showing some of the locations today. It's quite a collection.
It really is.
So our mission today, to navigate all this material on the campaigns across North America.
And give you a clear, engaging picture of what went down.
Exactly. Highlighting some surprising details, connections, but without hopefully feeling like a history lesson.
Right. Let's dive in.
Okay, so
Right.
where do we start? The sources show this conflict was brewing for a while.
Definitely. You look back, and one of the early things that pops up is Jay's Treaty from way back in 1794.
Right, the Treaty of Amity, Commerce, and Navigation. Its main goal was damage control, basically, keeping the peace between Britain and America while Britain was fighting France.
Yeah, but the feeling in America, and the sources echo this, was that they'd, surrendered too much to the British. That phrase really sticks out.
It does. Things like trade restrictions, the whole impressment issue with sailors. It left a bad taste.
It really did. A kind of simmering resentment, you could say. It didn't just go away.
And one concrete outcome of Jay's Treaty, the British agreed to leave Fort Niagara.
Which was a big deal, strategically.
Yeah.
Right at the mouth of the Niagara River.
But they didn't exactly pack up and go home, did they?
No, they just hopped across the river and built Fort George. Practically neighbors.
It's amazing. Fort Niagara itself had this whole history. French Fort Conti, then Denonville, British, American, British again, finally American. Now it's a historic site in Youngstown, New York.
And Fort George is just across the way in Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario, which also had other names, like Butlersburg, Newark, even capital of Upper Canada for a bit.
We've even got the coordinates here. Old Fort Niagara,
Mm-hmm.
43 degrees, 15 minutes north, roughly. And Fort George is super close, just slightly different longitude.
Looking at those satellite images really drives home how close they were, almost staring each other down.
It really does. That proximity, it just screams rivalry, doesn't it? Control the forts, control the river, control the trade.
Absolutely. The Niagara frontier was critical.
Okay, so let's jump forward to 1812. The Americans see Britain still tangled up in Europe.
And maybe sense an opportunity. Or perhaps feel their grievances haven't been addressed.
Right. So President James Madison, with James Monroe backing him up, goes to Congress and asks for a declaration of war.
And wrapped up in this is that idea of manifest destiny.
Yeah, it's a tricky term. Its meaning shifted over time. But back then, it was sort of this belief in a special mission for America to expand.
Kind of national purpose tied to westward expansion.
And interestingly, Monroe's ideas on this later feed into the Monroe Doctrine in 1823. We've got a link to that in the source list.
That expansionist drive was definitely a powerful undercurrent.
Which brings us to this really interesting letter. Jonathan Dayton writing to Madison in early 1813.
Ah, yes, Dayton's letter. He wasn't exactly thrilled with the war plan, was he?
Not at all,
Yeah.
especially the one-year enlistment idea. He basically says, look, by the time these guys know what they're doing, their year is up.
You end up with a constantly green army, and it costs a fortune to keep retraining. It's very practical, his thinking.
Totally. He cuts right through the patriotic fervor to the logistical problems.
So what was his alternative?
2-year enlistments, for starters, and a focused strategy. Take Upper Canada first, push all the way to Montreal, securing the British forts along the way.
Use the lakes for supply lines.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, he talks about keeping communication open via the lakes, building bateaux, those flat-bottom boats, just like General Amherst did in the French and Indian War to get to Montreal.
Drawing on historical precedent. Smart.
And then winter in Montreal and go for Quebec in the spring.
A multi-stage plan. Thinking long-term.
He also had specific advice. Grab Detroit and Fort Malden fast. Don't wait for a possible armistice.
Secure bargaining chips, basically. And avoid political heat back home.
Exactly. And get this, he suggested using pikes. Spears.
In 1813, that's unexpected.
Right, for close quarters fighting, presumably. And then he throws in his 2 cents that Secretary M, almost certainly Monroe, should be commanding the army.
Huh. So a bit of unsolicited personnel advice thrown in there, too.
Yep. Strategy, logistics, and a touch of political maneuvering.
It shows how intertwined it all was.
Okay, so war is declared. The plans are, well, they're in motion. Let's look at where the fighting actually happened, starting near Detroit and Sandwich.
Right. And for the Canadian view, we have that recruitment ballad. Come all you bold Canadians.
That's a great piece. Really captures a sense of confidence, eh? Focusing on that clash at Sandwich, modern-day Windsor, Ontario.
It does. And it highlights General Brock's leadership. He seems like a really key figure in rallying the Canadians.
The ballad mentions him seizing ships, heading to York, then gathering his gallant heroes to face the Americans out west.
And the Canadians are fired up. Along with you, we'll go, ready to give the proud Yankees some British play.
It describes the demand for surrender at Sandwich. The Americans refuse at first.
So the Canadians, as the song says, opened up our great guns.
And that apparently did the trick. The American commander asks for a ceasefire and surrenders the whole garrison.
A quick, decisive victory for Brock. That was a significant blow to the Americans early on, especially in the West.
Definitely set a tone. Okay, let's shift east to Fort Erie.
Another key spot on the Niagara, and it has that great Seneca name.
Gagwagge, which means the place of hats.
Yeah, the story goes that after a battle on Lake Erie, French hats washed ashore. The Seneca hadn't seen them before, so the name stuck. You can still visit the fort today.
Adds a layer of history, doesn't it? Reminds you people were there long before 1812.
For sure.
The fighting around Fort Erie sounds like it was pretty intense.
Back and forth, there was an American attack on Black Rock across the river, but it got repelled.
If that had worked, it could have really messed with British supplies.
True. But the British had successes too. They captured those two American schooners, the Ohio and the Somers, in August 1814.
But then the Americans went straight for Fort Erie itself.
And the defense was tough. There's that story about the American officer George Mercer-Brooke.
The night raid, using a hidden lamp to spot the Canadian guns for his own artillery.
Pretty clever. Shows the kind of initiative happening on the ground.
On both sides, yeah. Then the British built a stronger battery. More firepower aimed at the fort.
Right. And after they captured an American picket, a patrol basically, the rest of the Americans pulled back inside the fort.
But eventually the British commander, Drummond, had to withdraw. Shortages and casualties piling up for the Americans inside.
But it wasn't quite over. The Americans sent out raiding parties,
prompting a Canadian counterattack at Cook's Mills, which pushed the Americans back into Fort Erie again.
until finally, in November 1814, the Americans decided to abandon it.
And they destroyed it as they left. Scorched earth.
That constant struggle just shows how vital Fort Erie was. Neither side wanted the other to have it.
Okay, let's talk about the Montreal campaign, a shift in American strategy in early 1813.
Yeah, the thinking was capture Montreal, cut off the St. Lawrence supply route. That would really hurt the British further west in Upper Canada.
The plan was for two separate American armies to meet up at Isle Perrot, right, just west of Montreal.
That was the plan, a major objective. Taking Montreal would have been huge. The economic and political center, really.
But it didn't quite come together that way.
No, that particular campaign fizzled out.
All right, let's swing back west again, to York. Modern Toronto.
Before York, there was a French presence there, Fort Roux, down by the Humber River.
A trading post first, then a fort. And after the 7 Years' War, apparently a trader named Rousseau rebuilt a fort there, pledging loyalty to Britain.
Right, Fort Toronto. Though its exact location and another spot called St. John's House seems a bit fuzzy. Different old maps show slightly different things.
Like that Bouchette map from 1792. It's a good reminder that history isn't always perfectly mapped out, literally.
Ah, true. You're piecing it together from clues.
Then in 1793, John Graves Simcoe shows up, establishes York a bit further east near the Don River.
And by 1796, it's the capital of Upper Canada, moved from Newark.
And then, much later, 1834, it becomes Toronto, now a huge city.
Simcoe also got Fort York built, the British one, northeast of the old French site.
And there's that cool little story about John Scadding's cabin.
Yeah, the early settler. His cabin got moved and is still preserved on the exhibition grounds.
A direct link back to those very early days. Pretty neat.
Establishing York and Fort York really cemented British control and development in that part of Upper Canada.
Okay, shifting east again slightly. French Mills, later Fort Covington.
Just south of the border. It became an important American regrouping spot after some setbacks.
And connected to that is Dennis's delay, the Battle of Hoople's Creek, November 1813.
Right. A fairly large American force under Jacob Brown lands at Sioux Rapids on the St. Lawrence.
But a Canadian militia unit led by Captain James Dennis spots them.
And Dennis acts fast. They destroy the bridge at Hoople's Creek.
And then use the terrain fighting from cover to hold up the much larger American force.
Buying time for other Canadian units. A classic delaying action.
And there's that local story about Granny Hoople helping a wounded American.
Yeah, those local anecdotes add such color.
These smaller fights, maybe not famous battles, but they clearly mattered. Disrupting plans, showing militia effectiveness.
Absolutely. Crucial time bought, local knowledge used well.
Okay, back to the Niagara region. Fort George again.
So, May 1813, the Americans pound it with artillery from Fort Niagara across the river.
Soften it up, then cross and capture it.
Right, and they push further into Upper Canada after that.
But the British and their allies push back. By December, the Americans are retreating from Fort George.
And burning it as they go. Scorched earth again.
But the British move right back in, rebuild it, and even add a new defense, Fort Mississauga nearby.
It just goes back and forth. And earlier that year, July 1813, the British had pushed towards Black Rock on the American side,
They got stopped initially by General Porter's forces.
but went back later and captured the settlement, ships, supplies. The Battle of Black Rock or Buffalo.
That whole peninsula was just constant fighting.
A critical gateway. Everyone knew it.
Now, something different and pretty grim. The burning of Fairfield.
Ugh, yeah. The Moravian Mission Settlement on the Thames River, October 1813.
Peaceful community, missionaries, and the Americans raid it, pillage, burn the church, houses, take prisoners.
A really terrible event. And it's during that same engagement, the Battle of the Thames, or Moravian Town, that Tecumseh was killed.
A huge loss for the British Allied Indigenous Confederacy, and devastating for the Moravians.
A very dark chapter.
Okay, moving on to Burlington Heights.
Strategic high ground. Richard Beasley had a trading post there.
And after the British pulled back from Fort George, General Vincent regrouped his forces there.
Right, and Lieutenant Colonel John Harvey started building serious fortifications.
It later became the site of Dundurn Castle, built by Alan Napier McNabb.
Who had those interesting royal connections way down the line, right, to the Duchess of Cornwall?
Yeah, small world, but back then it was a key defensive spot.
Definitely. Good high ground overlooking the area, smart choice.
And that leads us to the Battle of Stony Creek, June 1813, or Plenderleith's daring raid.
The night attack. The Americans were camped at the Gage Farm, planning to hit Burlington Heights.
But the British hit them first, at night. It wasn't going great initially for the British.
Until Major Plenderleith makes this incredibly bold move with just a few men.
Captures 4 American cannons and, amazingly, 2 American generals, Winder and Chandler.
Talk about throwing the enemy into confusion. The Americans just fell apart after that, retreated to 40 Mile Creek.
And local legend gives credit to Billy Green, the scout, for tipping off the British.
Right. And a later American attempt on Burlington Heights in July just bounced right off.
That night raid at Stony Creek really shifted momentum in that area.
A perfect example of how a smaller, daring action can have a huge impact. Initiative and good intel.
Then there's Ducharme's Trap, the Battle of Beaver Dams, also June 1813.
Another fascinating one. An American force under Borsler comes out from Fort George.
But a Canadian scout sees them. Lieutenant Fitzgibbon gets word.
And Fitzgibbon sends Lieutenant Ducharme with a group of Conowick Mohawk warriors to set an ambush.
In the beechwoods near Beaver Dams, Ducharme picks a great spot along a ravine.
Positions his forces perfectly. The Americans march right into it.
Wham! Hit with heavy fire, the 14th Regiment gets caught.
And Borsler ends up surrendering his entire force to a much smaller group of Canadians and Indigenous allies.
Must have been quite a shock for the Americans.
Absolutely. A brilliant use of combined forces and local terrain knowledge. Fitzgibbon's plan, Ducharme's execution.
Okay, let's look at the naval side. Kingston, Cataraqui, and Sackett's Harbor on Lake Ontario.
Kingston was huge for the British. They set up the naval dockyard at Point Frederick back in 1789.
Headquarters for the Provincial Marine, the sort of early Canadian Navy.
And to protect that vital port, they started building Fort Henry across the bay in 1812.
Control of Lake Ontario was everything, wasn't it? Supplies, troop movements.
Totally. It was the highway. Kingston was the key British base on the lake.
So, May 1813, the British Governor-General, Prevost, leads a landing near the American base at Sackett's Harbor.
Lands on Horse Island. It wasn't a full invasion, more like a strong probe, testing the defenses.
Canadian gunboats firing, causing some confusion. Some Americans surrender, others burn their own supplies.
Yeah, to keep them out of British hands. But the main American defenses held firm, stronger than Prevost expected.
So he pulls back to Horse Island, leaving the Americans kind of scratching their heads about what just happened.
A reconnaissance in force, really. Didn't win big, but maybe learned something and kept the Americans guessing.
Then we have the wonderfully named Divine Disappointment.
The Battle of Lackaw River, late 1812. The Americans hadn't had much success invading Canada by then.
Right, so General Dearborn leads a raid into Lower Canada, aiming for Lackaw.
But a smaller Canadian force under de Salaberry stops them at the bridge over the Lackaw River.
The Canadians pull back, regroup, then withdraw completely.
And then, in the dark and fog, two different American units start shooting at each other.
Oh, you're kidding. Friendly fire.
Yep. Meanwhile, the Canadians evacuated Lackaw and used scorched earth tactics, deny the Americans resources.
So the Americans, having shot at each other and finding nothing to sustain them, had to retreat.
Hence, divine disappointment, a combination of good defense, bad weather, and American misfortune.
Wow. Okay, up north, Fort Mackinac.
Strategic choke point in the upper Great Lakes, originally French Fort Michilimackinac on the mainland.
Then the British moved it to Mackinac Island. Better defense, controlled the fur trade routes.
Huge influence in the region. And the British grabbed it in a surprise attack right at the start of the war, July 1812.
And an American attempt to take it back 2 years later, July 1814, failed pretty badly.
The British had reinforced it. Holding Mackinac was key to their strategy in the Upper Lakes and their alliances with indigenous nations.
All right, let's move to Plattsburgh, September 1814.
Plattsburgh, New York. Founded back in 1784. By the war, the Americans had a big base there, Cantonment Plattsburgh, with defensive forts, redoubts.
So September 1814, a British land army under Prevost advances, sets up siege lines.
One of his commanders, Brisbane, apparently thought they could take the American forts. He was ready to storm them.
But Prevost ordered a withdrawal.
Right. At the same time, the British naval fleet under Captain Downey comes down the Richelieu River onto Lake Champlain.
And runs into the American fleet under Commodore McDonough in Plattsburgh Bay.
Big naval battle. Downey is killed, the British ships are defeated and retreat.
So the naval loss kind of seals the fate of the land campaign.
Pretty much.
Oh.
Even if Brisbane was right about taking the forts without controlling the lake, the position was untenable. American historians focus on the naval win.
But some accounts suggest the land attack might have worked if Prevost hadn't pulled back. Interesting divergence.
It really shows land and sea power were totally linked there. And that American naval victory definitely influenced the peace talks.
Okay, now for a really dramatic one. The burning of Washington, August 1814. The daring of Cockburn.
Vice Admiral Cochrane was overall commander, but Rear Admiral Cockburn was very active in these coastal raids.
And the defense of Washington, D.C. was, well, not great.
Shockingly weak, really. Madison, the government, they all had to flee to Maryland.
British troops under General Ross just march in.
And they deliberately target public buildings. The Capitol, the Treasury, the President's house.
Which got scorched, leading to it being painted white, hence the White House.
Right. But they mostly spared private homes. It was symbolic, retaliatory for the American burning of York earlier.
Still, a huge psychological blow to the Americans. Took ages to recover, and the British were only there for about a day.
Yeah, made their point and left. A deeply controversial moment.
And around the same time, Cockburn sends Captain Gordon up the Potomac.
Target. Fort Warburton, later Fort Washington.
And the American commander there makes a strange call.
Decides to disable the guns, abandon the fort, and blows up the magazine as they leave.
Just clears the path for Gordon's fleet.
Exactly. So Gordon sails up to Alexandria, Virginia.
And the town, seeing the fleet and knowing the fort is gone, just surrenders.
Yeah, the terms.
Yeah.
Hand over all merchant ships and their cargo. A huge haul for the British.
The raid on Alexandria, another successful British coastal action.
Demonstrated the Royal Navy's reach and American vulnerability.
Okay, next up, Baltimore, September 1814.
Baltimore was a major port and better defended than Washington. Fort McHenry guarding the harbor.
Right, originally Fort Whetstone, and strong defenses on Hampstead Hill, Rogers Bastion.
British land forces under General Brooke advance. The Americans pull back into these prepared defenses.
The British check it out, do some reconnaissance.
And decide basically that attacking those fortifications would be too costly, not worth the potential losses.
So they withdraw. Baltimore holds.
That strong defenses worked.
Now for the Dirty Devils section in our sources. MacArthur's raids, Eastern raids, sounds unpleasant.
Yeah, this is late war, October 1814. American plans for, essentially, terror raids in the Lake Erie region.
Battle Hill, or Longwoods. An American raiding party digs in on a hill.
Canadians attack, get a pulse with casualties. Both sides eventually pull back.
Then the Eastern raids. General Azard's troops looting and burning farms in Niagara.
until they're stopped at Cook's Mills by Canadian forces and retreat.
But the Western raids under General MacArthur sound particularly harsh.
Cavalry raid out of Detroit, stealing horses, looting Oxford, reaching Burford.
Can't cross the Grand River, so they attack Malcolm's Mills, Oakland, overrun the militia there.
And then widespread pillaging, burning, reports of torture even. Just awful.
Then they retreat back towards Detroit, pursued by British cavalry.
These raids on civilians. They left deep scars and a lot of bitterness, a grim reminder of war's brutality.
Absolutely. Which leads us, somewhat ironically, to Fort McHenry again and the Star-Spangled Banner.
Right, Fort Whetstone, renamed Fort McHenry. The British Navy sails up in September 1814 after Washington.
And they bombard it heavily, just pound it from the ships like they did at Fort Warburton.
But this time, the fort holds out. Major Armistead and the garrison don't break.
The British fleet eventually gives up and withdraws in the morning.
And seeing that big American flag still flying over the fort.
That's the moment Francis Scott Key witnesses from a British ship where he was negotiating a prisoner release.
Exactly. Inspires him to write the poem, The Defense of Fort McHenry.
Which, set to the tune of an old song, becomes the U.S. national anthem. An iconic moment born from that defense.
Truly is. Resilience under fire.
Okay, final theater of war. The Louisiana Campaign. Down south.
A region with a really complex past, French, Spanish, French again, then American via the Louisiana Purchase.
And New Orleans is the prize. Controls the Mississippi. Hugely strategic.
So December 1814, British forces arrive. Lake Borgne, Bayou Bienvenue. They set up near the city.
Americans under Andrew Jackson scramble to build defenses, using that old canal, the Rodriguez Canal.
Jackson. And he gets help from Jean Lafitte and his pirates, famously.
Right. After some initial fights, the main battle is January 8, 1815, at Chalmette Plantation.
British plan a three-pronged attack. Pakenham, Rennie, Gibbs leading the columns.
But it goes badly wrong for them. The American artillery and rifle fire from behind the canal defenses is devastating.
Yeah, and crucial supplies, the ladders and fascines needed to cross the canal and scale the earthworks, didn't arrive where needed.
Yeah.
Major failure there.
Huge casualties for the British. Pakenham is killed, Gibbs too.
A smaller British force under Thornton actually had some success on the other side of the river.
But the main assault was a disaster. The British had to retreat.
A massive American victory made Jackson a national hero.
Even though the war was technically already over.
Exactly. The peace treaty had been signed in Ghent, Belgium, weeks before. News just hadn't arrived yet.
Incredible timing. What about Fort St. Philip?
Downriver from New Orleans, the British Navy bombarded it for over a week in January 1815.
But the Americans there refused to surrender.
So the British eventually gave up and withdrew. Its exact link to Chalmette seems a bit unclear in the sources.
And further east, Mobile, Fort Boyer.
Americans built Fort Boyer at the mouth of Mobile Bay. The British failed to take it in September 1814, lost HMS Hermes in the process.
But they came back in February 1815 after the Battle of New Orleans.
This time with a larger force, and they successfully captured Fort Boyer.
They were getting ready to move on Mobile itself, defended by Fort Charlotte.
When the news finally arrived, Treaty of Ghent signed. Stop fighting.
Just in time to save Mobile, possibly. Wow, those delays in communication had real consequences.
Absolutely. Fighting continued long after the diplomats had finished.
Which brings us neatly to the treaty itself, the Sue for Peace.
American and British delegations meet in Ghent, Belgium. Tsar Alexander of Russia initially offered to mediate.
Negotiations take time, there's back and forth, but they sign on Christmas Eve, 1814.
December 24th. And the core principle.
Status quo antebellum.
Back to how things were before the war. Pre-war borders restored.
Right, and setting up commissions to sort out boundary disputes later.
British Parliament ratifies it quickly. Takes the U.S. Senate until February 16th, 1815.
And the official end comes when they exchange the ratified copies in Washington on February 17th.
Key points. Stop fighting. Give back captured territory, with a few minor exceptions. Exchange prisoners. Set up those boundary commissions.
So, militarily, kind of a draw. No one really won territory.
Pretty much. It ended the fighting, returned things to the starting point on the map, and aimed to prevent future disputes.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, it's really striking how far-flung this war was.
It really was. From the Great Lakes, down the coast, all the way to the Gulf. All interconnected.
Hopefully pulling from all those sources, the letters, the ballad, the maps, we've given a sense of the main events.
Balancing the big picture with those specific memorable details, the place of hats, Dayton's strategic thinking, those raids, The flag at Fort McHenry?
It's a complex conflict, lots of different motivations, surprising turns.
And fascinating to think that despite the treaty just restoring borders, the war itself had huge lasting impacts on national identities, future policies, the whole U.S.-Canada relationship.
That's a perfect place to leave it, actually. Here's a thought to take away. If the treaty just reset the map, what were the real long-term consequences of all that intense fighting for these North American neighbors?
Something to mull over. And hopefully folks feel inspired to dig deeper into whatever part of this story caught their interest.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.